What's up, VK family? It's your boy Vital, and we appreciate you for joining us on another YouTube video with Mr. IH Productions behind the camera, as we always do. Now, you might already notice, today's a little bit different. There's no sneakers in front of me. We're not doing a 4K review. We're not doing a vlog about Vital Chinatown, Chicago, Chinatown's newest luxury streetwear boutique. But today, we are actually gonna be showing off probably an hour and a half or so of a panel discussion that we actually held in this space. If you watched our last review, we told you guys about it, we told you what we do, but we haven't dropped a video in like 2-3 weeks because we've been focused on this. And actually what ended up happening is We Each Belong, a restorative justice brand, joined us here, a restorative justice streetwear brand, joined us here as we collabed and did a big panel discussion, which held Asian and Black organizations in Chicago that had to do with education. And we talked about the inequities in our city and the ways we can come together to kind of solve them, right? So we really made sure to capture that moment so that we can kind of spread the message to the rest of Chicago, but also the world, that we are not just a boutique that focuses on sales, right? But at the end of the day, we have a mission and a strong passion behind the work that needs to be done in our city, right? So anyways, all that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoy this panel discussion. I hope you leave plenty of comments just talking about what really resonated with you throughout the experience. And if you want to join us on the next one, right? Because it definitely won't be the last. So that being said, guys, I don't want to hold you back from this very fruitful conversation. So we'll see you on the next video, but enjoy, guys.
What's going on, everybody? So I believe everybody already is familiar with the We Each Belong mission that I just shared. Gratitude to everybody for coming out. My name is Andrew. I'm the founder of We Each Belong, here with an esteemed collection, mini community here of Asian educators that I have had the honor to meet in various ways, and just getting to meet, but excited to kind of know you more, Julie. And wanted to set a bigger context. So I myself, even though I'm the founder of We Each Belong, our racial healing streetwear brand, we raise money to fund healing spaces for Asian, Black, Latino, Indigenous, etc. to come together. Oh, hello, welcome. Hello, welcome. In addition to that, my day job is with Chicago Public Schools, and actually the roots of We Each Belong were really planted and deepened during my time as an educator down in Roseland and Morgan Park, working with primarily Black students on the South Side. And so that was a really transformative experience for me. And at that time, I felt like, even though it was a privilege as an Asian person to be able to build solidarity, build relationship with my Black students and their families, I started recognizing that I felt like something was missing from my experience. And a lot of that was, man, I want to be able to like stir some of these thoughts, ideas, and experiences with other Asians who are educators across our city. And I felt like I didn't really have that community. And I looked up the stats, and actually less than 5% of CPS staff are identified as Asian. When I met Vital, who's right there wearing our mushroom collab tee. Yeah, Vital, man, it's been a blessing to connect with him. Thank you, Chief, for connecting us. I learned that Vital also is an educator. I believe special education, is that correct?
Yeah, actually,
if you want to.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't expect that spotlight real quick. Hi, everybody, welcome. My name is Vital, and yes, I was a special education teacher in Chicago Public Schools for 5.5 years before I transitioned to my current role. So now I'm a special education administrator for Chicago Public Schools, and I work with 25 schools and their administrations to better the special education programs in their schools. Right? But yeah, meeting Andrew was absolutely awesome. We had to make this happen, right? I'm just seeing we are into the same things outside of education, but always tying that mission back in. So thank you for sure.
I know you're a pro, but sorry to throw that on yourself. But yeah, so kind of being driven by that thirst, right, to build community. It's like, man, if there's so few of us, there being so few of us should not be an excuse to not have community, right? So it's beautiful that you all are here. Again, the Selena squad runs deep. Y'all came through, but it's an honor to meet you all. And yeah, let's get into it and kind of receive some of this wisdom and experience here. Oh, wow.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. Hey. Yeah, so came just in time. We are just starting the education panel. Yep. All right, so we'll start with just kind of doing some introductions. If you could share your name, pronoun, your school role in school, and then a fun little, what was a formative show, movie, or book as a kid?
Hi everyone, my name is Selena Chang. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm a school social worker and I did work for an alternative school for 3 years in Chicago Public Schools. And for me, growing up, the TV show would probably be anything on PBS Kids or Channel 11. So like Arthur, Cyber Chase, Sagwa.
That sounds great.
Yeah, that's my jam because I didn't have cable. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Julia Chetu, she, her pronouns, and I work in. I actually have a ton of students from Chinatown in my classes, and I'm probably known there for teaching Asian American Lit. I started the pilot course in 2014, and I do think it's the first full credit, like core course of Asian American literature 1 year in the nation. I don't think anyone teaches Asian American Lit other than I think a few schools as an elective, but this is a 1 year core course in Chicago Public Schools, and I have yet to see another state or city doing that for 1 year. And so it is their English for credit if they choose to take it. Something profound like book, movie. I think when I was in high school, my English teacher introduced me to the novel Things Fall Apart. And it's not an Asian American lit novel. I was just amazed that in the power of writing, like Chinua Achebe wrote a book, just a very clever book to get back at, British colonialism, and the way he did it through the pen was just absolutely amazing, and the way my teacher taught it was amazing. And then I majored in English, and then my professor taught it, and I thought, okay, when I become a high school English teacher, I'm going to teach it. And so I still teach it to this day, and I've been teaching it for 23 years.
Wow. Dang. All right, good luck, man. No, that's crazy. That's great. I'll explain why that's crazy in a second, but yeah.
Right to Pat? No. My name is Gary Chu. I use he, him pronouns. I teach mathematics, second. And I think this is year 13. So I've been there for a little bit. Time flies. And I think, I was going to say Arthur, but I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go with the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Yes.
I always wanted to be a Power Ranger. And I did martial arts growing up, and so just to see martial arts in a kid's show was kind of really fun among a very racially diverse cast of characters.
That's true.
Yeah.
Which one did you have one where you were like, I know this isn't about education, but I gotta know.
Which
was
Power
there one
Ranger?
that were like, oh, I want to be the Blue Ranger?
I wanted to be the Green Ranger, just like the dragon. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
If you know, you know. Okay, if you don't worry about it.
I could never really. I never really had any of the toys or the costumes or anything like that. So as an adult, I sometimes long to make some purchases, but my financial advisor says that.
It's all right. I'll talk to you. Okay. Man, yeah, and the White Ranger comeback.
That's what I'm saying.
Sheesh. Okay, so before getting to the next question, the reason the Things Fall Apart thing is crazy is because I also taught English. That was the first full-length novel I taught my first year teaching. So that's crazy, and that was a turning point because it was the first transformative moment with the student that I had my first year. This was a kid who when I first was, he was like, who is this guy? He's knocking over papers, this is stupid. I don't want to learn any of it. We could just get up, walk out of class, right? When we started reading Things Fall Apart, and before the if you haven't read the book, Before the Colonialism, it's a lot about like fatherhood, like the first kind of third of the book. And when we were talking about like themes of parenting and like what it means to be a father and a son, all this stuff, that kid who was like walking out of my class throwing stuff, you know, the whole class was like being really disruptive one day, and I was having trouble like getting the class back on track. And he stands up and he's like, "Everybody shut up. Mr. Hong is teaching us about life." And everyone just like shut up. And I was just like, it was so like heartwarming to me, because I was like, that's what I'm trying to do. Oh yeah.
Also, the reason why it's amazing is that Illinois is the first place to pass Asian American history as a required curriculum.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that already that there's 3 suburban districts that are not going to be doing it this
Of
year.
course.
So they're breaking law and they're breaking policy.
And
So-
rural Illinois.
Yeah, because I think that the reality is that Chicago is kind of the capital of Illinois. So like the fact that you taught that class, even though Springfield didn't teach it yet, like ISBE noticed, and so did. And Jones obviously is a diverse school, so even more than Peyton. So like I think that that's been really, really important that you did that. Oh, and then also that the only 2 women superintendents of color, one's Indian and one's Black, and that's in the entire state of Illinois. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Thank you for that wealth of knowledge. Yeah, and definitely it would be silly if we didn't get into that. So we will definitely dig in more into that. The TChat. Welcome you all. If you're not, I don't know if you were familiar with the larger event going on. It's just to the T. So we're engaging in a panel of Asian educators. So it's kind of celebrating our experiences and our stories. So thanks for coming through. So yeah, the next question is, so we kind of have like 2 phases of questions, and that you're reminding me, we'll also for sure have time for like questions and thoughts, comments, reflection, things like that. The first half of questions, I wanted to focus actually on like your guys' personal experience, right? Before we kind of get into the higher level stuff that we're all wrapped up in as educators, want to start with like, so if you kind of think back to your childhood, what was your school experience, and what did you have more moments that were affirming? Did you have more moments that were denying? When I say denying, I kind of mean like you like know who you are, who you want to be, but the structures or the influences are like not letting you be that, right? So yeah, what was your overall experience? And if there is a specific like affirming or denying moment that kind of shaped you.
Start.
Hey, please.
This is gonna be interesting because my parents actually don't know a lot of these things that happened to me. I would say majority of my time going to school from elementary all the way until I would say junior year of high school was pretty denying. Went to a school with a lot of affluent white families and students. I got bullied a lot. I think trigger warning, I'm gonna throw out a couple of those stereotypical jokes and stuff, but I remember one time, it was in 2nd grade, someone asked me what religion do I practice, my family practice, and I said, oh, I'm Buddhist. And he was like, so you don't believe in God? I was like, no. And he's like, well, then you're gonna go to hell. And I was like, cool, I don't know what that means, but got a lot of, oh, so you only see in wide vision, which was great. I think something that also, because I was being denied of my Asian identity, I lashed out a lot. I got into a lot of fights, whether it was verbal or physical fights. I think the most intense moment was I was in, I think it was like 7th or 8th grade. I was in the girls' bathroom in a group of girls. I didn't like that my hair was black, so they were like, what we could do, we could wash it out.
Oh my god.
And the best way to wash it out was the toilet. So it wasn't good. I quickly used a hand dryer to dry my hair out afterwards and did not tell my parents about it. And I think the reason why I didn't tell my parents is because I didn't want them to feel bad, right? Like, I think many of us who hold this Asian identity, we don't want to disappoint our parents because they work so hard to get us to where we are. So again, my mom and dad are here, so sorry this is the first time that you have to hear about this. But on the bright side, I would say a affirming point for myself was it was junior year of high school. I was, struggling a lot with mental health. I had a lot of things going on, and it wasn't even coming from an Asian American educator, but my counselor, who was a Black woman, told me there are certain experiences that you're going to go through, Selena, that no one's going to understand. And even though I can't understand it, I'm here to listen to you. I thought that was really affirming because I could explain like what it means to be an Asian student in this primarily Hispanic and white high school, and just kind of explain what I was going through. So I thought that was a very affirming moment.
Thank you for sharing.
Put my fighting days behind me.
Wow, that's quite the story. Yeah, I don't have those type of stories. But I will say that I just knew that I was different. I mean, I might have known I was in the margins, but I would say I did have like a small affinity group, even if I didn't know that was an affinity group at the time. Like I just, like family, friends, and then going to school with a few of them, I think I gravitated towards that. I also grew up with immigrant parents, and so I switched hats at school, right? Like I was trying to be the American at school, and when I went home, it was an entirely different lifestyle. Take off your shoes, eat with your hands, all of that, which, I don't think I shared at school. Like now it's called cultural responsive teaching, where you bring in the students' culture into the classroom, and then they're actually motivated to learn. I had none of that. Like I'm a little older than all of you, so I was always studying dead white males, or in history, we were never in the history books, and I just thought that was the norm. I don't think I knew any better, so I was just a dumb kid, right? I was like, yeah, this is what we learn at school, and this is how the majority lives, and I need to adapt or assimilate to that. And my parents are immigrants, so I know that when I go home, I switch hats, right? So that's how I lived my life. If I had a dual identity, I don't think I knew what that was or the labels for it. I was just going through the motions of what I thought would be acceptable at the time. And now that I'm older, I start to realize things and try to reprogram or unlearn stuff so that I could just mesh my identities together into a hybrid identity. But at the time, I was going through the motions because I didn't know that I didn't have to be invisible, right? Like I didn't know that I could be reading books about people that looked like me. I just didn't know any better. Even in college, I didn't know any better. I went to Loyola, and that was also Brit Lit, American Lit, and dead white males. I didn't know I could be taking other classes, and if I did see myself in a book, that was an elective. It wasn't required, right? I hope things have changed. I'm trying to be part of that change with my own lit class, but I think that's my story. I was like a little invisible on the margin, and I thought that's where I belonged at the time, like in the 80s and 90s. I think I thought, yeah, this is normal. Why would I question my teacher about what's in the syllabus, right? Like this, they're the ones who made it. I'm just gonna go with the flow.
Thank you.
CPS product from pre-K through 12. Went to a magnet school for pre-K through 12 because my sisters went there. Big sisters. And so in that school, it was very racially diverse, specifically with respect to Black, white, and Latina people. In my grade level, each grade had like 200 students in it. And so within my grade level, there was, I think, 3.5 Asian kids.
3.5.
There weren't a lot. There weren't a lot of us. Biracial folks, right? And so growing up, I always felt like I was caught in the racial dichotomy that is a lot of Black and white. And navigating that space really was challenging because I didn't really know where I fit in. And sometimes I tried my best to fit in one way. Sometimes I tried to fit myself into another way. And I didn't really know what Asianness was. And I'm still trying to figure what that is to me as an adult now. But the first time that I had an Asian educator, a biracial Asian educator, was in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. She was my science teacher. recently reached out to her and just kind of thanked her that she was one of the inspirations in my life. But that was the first time that like she named Asianness for me in an education space. And then when I went to high school, I went to Lincoln Park High School. That was the first time I saw so many Asian students because we had a lot of kids from Chinatown come into Lincoln Park. I grew up in the north side of Chicago, and so I didn't have that experience like being in a classroom space with so many people who look like me. And to hear language that my parents speak to each other but not to me was very interesting too. And high school was the second place I had an Asian teacher, and it was in an American history class, and learned a bunch about white people. And go figure, right? But I just thought about like Asian educators in my life, and my big sister is an Asian educator, and she was one of the first ones that like I had a really strong relationship with. As I saw her go through a teacher prep program, I was kind of a guinea pig on a lot of her lessons and stuff like that. But then I didn't really have many Asian educators even through college. I went to Loyola as well, and then changed majors, changed universities. But at Loyola, I had one Asian professor, and then when I transferred to Northeastern for math and education, I had a math professor who just reminded me of my grandpa so much. That the way he talked, his humor, the way he story told, that it just is stuck with me. Yeah.
Thank y'all for sharing and really digging in, man. I think something that's coming up for me is like a sense of seeking, right? Seeking the classic question of like, who am I and how do I relate to the world around me? Or even maybe what really struck me about what you said, Julie, is not even knowing that that's a question to ask maybe at first, right? I think that one reason I think it's so important to have spaces like this and conversations like this is because when we're in an environment, when we're in an ecosystem where we're like being fed with other people's reflections and ideas, I think it helps to kind of awaken and water the seeds in ourselves, like to become more true, right? And so I'm feeling like I haven't thought about being in the classroom in a long time, but sitting here like listening to you, I'm like, man, should I go back to the classroom? Like, dang. But yeah, I'm just feeling really nourished like from your stories, and it heightens that truth for me that like the environments each of you were in, right? We're very, it's essential to be in the right environment. Let me put it like that, right? I think it reminds me it's essential to be in the right environment, the right ecosystem to, again, either affirm or deny who you are. It's exciting to see where you all have come now, right? And you all survived. And I do want to transition into like how that all informs the type of educators you are now, right? Personally, you did lean in a little bit already in your reflections, how your experience shaped your relationship with your Asian identity. If there is more that you want to unpack there, definitely go into that. But a second part to the question is not just how did those experiences when you were coming up, how did that shape your Asian identity, your relationship with it, your understanding of it? How did that also shape and inform the type of like educator you wanted to be, or even why you wanted to get into education, right? Do you have a certain like perspective, certain practices as a teacher that's informed by your Asian identity and your experience coming up in school?
Yeah.
We can sneak it, right?
I don't want to take up double airspace, but yeah. Okay. I feel like I'm still coming into who I want to be. The work continues both personally and professionally. Where I was 13 years ago when I started to where I am now is it's
Night and day.
I am embarrassed of what I was. and what I thought I knew, but I had no clue at that time. So in addition to teaching math at the high school level, I do professional development work for our staff. I facilitate educational racial equity work for all of our staff in our school district and present locally and nationally in many different aspects of education and racial equity work in education. So like me now would have torn 13-year ago me to shreds because it's like, what were you thinking? I am privileged to work in a school district that has a white minority, that has a third of our population that looks like us. It's enriching, it fills my cup, and when you shared initially that CPS has about 5% of staff that's Asian, less than. That's about twice the national average. National average, the current loose, it's like 2017, 2018, it was about 2% of public teaching. The public teaching force identifies as Asian. It took until the pandemic and being on Zoom, which is where I first met you, that I realized that my school district has 8.5% teaching staff, not including support staff or administrators, which we have, which data shows that support staff is historically folks of color. But like pure teaching staff, 8.5%. And for me to be able to stand in a hallway, I'm in a corner. I don't have one specific classroom, but like in any given moment of the day, I can stand in a corner of the hallway, and then in adjacent rooms, there's other East, Southeast, South Asian teachers.
Wow, that's crazy.
All in the same place at the same time. Granted, it sucks because sometimes students call me the wrong name, and I'm like, there's not a lot of us here that look like you. Like, my name is 3 letters long. But it's nice because I get to share stories with the young people. And 13 years ago, me would not have done that. I would have been like, what am I doing in class tomorrow? Like, I'm just so focused on like teaching, like the actual mechanics and physical act of teaching, where now I know that, or I'm coming to realize and continuing to learn that teaching is so much more than just being at the front of a classroom, which I also hate being at the front of a classroom, but to humanize the learning experience, to acknowledge and to invite folks to enter space to be authentically themselves. I would have not allowed myself to do that 13 years ago had I not done my own personal work and gotten into racial equity work in the education spaces. The fear that came with that 13 years ago, first of all, just not being tenured and the fear of being fired for just like talking about race in an education space, that was very real. Now I feel comfortable, and my response to anybody is, what are they gonna do, fire me? We got a national teacher shortage, like what are they gonna do, right? So I feel most me right now that I've ever felt, and most confidence in me being me in a classroom space. But it wasn't just a light switch. It took a lot of learning. It took a lot of failure. It took a lot of asking for help and seeking out community.
I'm not gonna repeat anything. I think I agree with your experience. I feel like super similar to my own. I'll even say there was Latino Lit and African American Lit as a core course, and I still didn't know that I could create an Asian. Like, I was like that young and naive at the time. Like, I had a student ask me to make it, and then I was like, oh, I'll actually get interest from this? Like, it took me that long to get there myself. So that is an aspect that I still feel like I'm learning about myself in terms of identity. Like, I'm in my 40s and I'm still like, do I know like who I am as an Asian, right? Like, so it's a never-ending process. But what I will say in designing the curriculum is that, that like the suicide rate is higher these days, right? For all races, but Asian Americans too. But I'm not gonna say like I can eradicate suicide through literature, but I wanna say that my class is kind of therapeutic. Like, they get to talk, they get to take up space for once and actually talk about their lives and their issues as an Asian American student. So it's kind of therapeutic, right? Like there's some stigma in getting therapy as an Asian American. And I just feel like my class is their space to develop that identity and like be able to share things that they've never been able to share in another classroom because it just wouldn't come up. And now they have that chance. So like, it's like we're moving in the right direction.
It's funny that you bring up this idea of representation in therapy because I am a school social worker.
Yeah.
I promise us, the three of us did not clap. We all planned.
That was on purpose.
Yeah.
That was on purpose.
Order.
Right? Master plan here.
So one of the main reasons why, so originally I wanted to become a doctor, as many people in this room may be able to relate. I wanted to become a doctor. My mom sometimes whispers, like, it's not too late. But so the reason why I wanted to become a doctor is because I wanted to help and work, especially with youth. So I was thinking like, oh, if I become a pediatrician, like this is a way for me to help youth. But then I realized I don't want to just help sick youth. Like I want to help youth all around. And the reason why I decided to go into social work is one, I don't think I could ever manage a classroom, so kudos to both of you. But also, I believe in the power of representation. So growing up, I didn't see an Asian educator until I got to U of I for college. So I wanted to be that representation so that, you know, high school me could look at someone who looks similar and be like, yes, like there is like at the end of the tunnel in a way. That sounds a bit dramatic, but I think especially for high schoolers, like it could be very daunting to go through high school. Along with being a school social worker, I'm also the head sponsor of Asian American Club at my high school. I do one of our different teams, which consists of many South Asian students, and then I'm also part of the district's equity team, which was something new that was presented to me. This is only my second year at Friend, but if you ask anyone, I'm definitely the staff member who likes to stir the pot. So I'm definitely the one who's trying something new, who's putting herself out there, who's asking these questions, and even though there have been a couple times where I'll ask myself, like, ooh, is this really something I want to be doing by pushing the envelope because of the fear of not being tenured? I tell myself, let's just go for it. Because my hope is that if my students, especially my Asian students, see me, you know, going above and beyond, that they too can see that and be like, oh, wow, if Ms. Chong is doing this, then maybe I can also, you know, think outside of the circle. I don't have to stay in the specific norms that, you know, society or the school has given me. So that's something that I've definitely leaned to. And it's nice, even though we do have a larger white population at Friend, we do have, I would say, pretty decent East Asian and South Asian population at Friend. And it's always nice when I have a student who, one, has the courage to come down to my office because they're like, I don't have any free periods, I'm taking all these AP tests, but like I still found time in my day to come see you because I finally realized like I really do need to talk to someone, and it just feels like you just get me, Ms. Chong. And I'm like, this is why I do what I do. It's like those little moments like that.
Man, thank you again, everybody. Speaking of stirring, there's like all these like thoughts, and I'm like, I had these questions planned, but I'm like, we could go into like a million different directions from what you just said. And clearly, Selena, even though you may not, you know, fight as you used to as a teenager with your fists, you're fighting the system. Okay, that's so appreciate your courage, right? And
They're probably the best.
there you go. Yeah, so I think it's so powerful, even though it's always important to name like the tragedies and the traumas and the burdens that we've carried as young people. And I hope that we can form a world, right, where like we can limit that as much as possible. I think it's really inspiring to hear that so much of where you were, right, and maybe not seeing a lot of representation and not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, to see that as a calling that you, and an opportunity that you now have, right? And so the countless number of youth who are being inspired by what you all are doing and the representation you're giving, I think is really incredible. I want to refer to a phrase that you used, which I don't know, I'm gonna borrow that as like, I have my own perception of like how I define education, you know, in its fullest form. But I love how you just summarized like, how did you say it? Something like bringing out the humanity or something? Yeah, that thing that you said about humanity, right? That to me, right, like how can education, how can these environments of schools be not just where we're learning like academic skill, but how are we kind of bringing out and nourishing the full, beautiful humanity, right, in our people. And not just with students, but also with staff. Maybe we can get a little bit there later. But I would love to talk about, to dig a little bit more into the practices you have with students, right? So I think not only are we in a position to be a representation for and to serve students who look like us, who identify as Asian themselves, but we can also be people, right, who, like that counselor that you said identified as Black, right, who could still be there and really listen, even though they may not fully understand. So I'd love to talk also about the opportunity, the unique opportunity. I think we have a unique position. And I think you even reference this phrase of like in-betweenness, right? So if there's an area that's primarily, you know, white and Black and Latino, but it's like where do the Asians like fit into that? So I would love to hear like what has been your approach, your practice, your mindset, and how the mindsets like manifest into your relationships, right? With also students who don't identify as Asian, right? With Black students, Latino students, and not even just about race as well. We could go into other intersections of identity, right? LGBTQ+, et cetera. So yeah, what's been that experience? How do you make that connection?
I guess I'm to go first now. So with literature, I do feel like this is like that type of question like that I could answer, in that we all have shared experiences that come out in a lit class. Like lit is lit in life, right? So like W.E.B. Du Bois had that whole term called double consciousness, right? Where he felt like he could be African American around other African Americans, and then when he was in a room with the dominant race, he saw himself through their eyes, and so wore a different hat, behaved differently. And I kind of resonate with that. I was like, oh, I get that. Like I'm one way with other Asian Americans, and then I am a different way when the dominant race is in the room with me. Like I see myself through their eyes, right? So I don't think I feel like that applies to so many groups, like the Latina community, the African American community, of course, the Asian American community, males and females. Like females feel that way when they're working in a male-dominated environment, and then they see themselves through a male's eyes. So we all have this opportunity to work in solidarity and see how some of our experiences relate to one another. And so we can do that in a lit class. Like that is the goal, is like, hey, you know, the pandemic impacted the East Asian American community. In what other areas do you see that in other cultures? And like, we've got, you know, the 9/11 terrorist attacks and everything else in history, and we could actually make those connections and make those bridges and then support each other. So we've all felt alienated at some point. My white American students can relate to that. Like, yeah, you know, like this is how I got treated in a sports team, right? Like I felt isolated in this incident. So this is how we build community and solidarity, by sharing those experiences and listening to one another. And in a lit class, I feel like that's my job. Like, let's connect this way. But that takes time and practice, and it also takes some bravery, right? Like to share your experience with someone who doesn't look like you. It's like the fear of the unknown. But we'll read a passage, a story, and then the whole point of a lit class is how am I going to connect to this text, right? So that's the idea of solidarity. The fact that we do have shared experiences, we just don't know it because we're unwilling to share because we don't really know the person sitting to the left or right of us.
So when you said earlier, like a bunch of dead old white guys, right? So I teach math, and a lot of society feels like math is a very objective, process-oriented subject matter. But specifically in like US math education programs, it does still center European mathematicians and scientists. So I do a presentation nationally called Not Just a Bunch of Dead Old White Guys. Literally, that's the title. And so in the classroom, so like my immediate sphere is working with young people, and in the classroom, I find ways to be intentional about highlighting mathematicians who are historically excluded from the conversation. So we talk about where specific theorems or formulas come from, who throughout history has contributed to those mathematics findings. And a lot of times students will immediately go to like a European mathematician, but then we dig deeper, and I have books at school where I can be like, well, let's go back throughout history. Centuries before this person was doing it, in a different part of the world, someone else was doing this too. And at the same exact time as that person, on a completely different continent, another person was doing it. And that's kind of beautiful to me that like math was discovered or like utilized in so many different ways by so many different people in so many different places, but like at the same time. Like how coincidental is that? And it's hard, like, because math is oftentimes viewed as just process and find a singular answer. I don't think that that's meaningful mathematics. So when you have a question like what is education, if I'm using a lens about mathematics as a content area and a tool, I want to instill into my young people that it's a tool to help analyze our world. And so in the ways that I work with my students, we try to analyze our immediate microcosm. And so one thing that we do at least annually is analyze our school's student racial demographics, our staff demographics, compare, contrast. What would it look like if our school reflected our student body? How does it make you feel? Like we talk about feelings in my classroom. So like when you first showed up on my Instagram feed, I'm like, restorative justice, like, circles. These are things I'm doing in my classroom. And we spend time sitting like this. Like, no, some people have notebooks, right? But like, oftentimes it's sitting with a talking piece, sharing what's coming up. And if people aren't comfortable, usually at the beginning, that's okay. But oftentimes, once we build that culture, the feelings come out, and the feelings about why don't we have more Black teachers in our building? We have that conversation. We talk about how it's making us feel. We have a very big MENA population, Middle Eastern, North African population, a huge refugee and immigration population in my school district, and we talk about like, why does this community not have staff in the building to help them feel supported? Like, where are our just decision makers in helping these folks? Obviously, we're making progress, but like, not trying to bash my district or anything. Not trying to bash the district. All right, great.
What district are you on?
He works for Niles Remind the camera.
It's your I'll
No, they're good. No, we have a lot of great people doing excellent work, but our kids have questions, and they demand and expect answers, and time is a huge parameter for them because high schoolers have 4 years in a building. And then they hope to make some change because they have siblings who are going to come in through. So their family has history through this building that lasts longer than the 4 years. And so they're looking for change, even though they're only there for 4 years. Lost my train of thought, but yeah.
No, I love that you brought that up there because if a lot of teachers were doing that work, that would, lessen my caseload. No. But no, a lot of the things that you're saying, like these questions that students are asking are a lot of questions that students bring to me in my office. Like, why is it that, my white math teacher doesn't quite understand when I have a problem that we're always reading about Susie and Tom? Like, where is Prithika or Sanjay? Like, why can't we just make these minute detailed changes? And usually my approach when I'm meeting with students in my office is this approach of open-mindedness. Like, usually I'll try to ask questions that kind of set the floor for the students. Almost anything in my office goes. There's like a couple of things I'm like, but almost anything in my office goes, which I think is really important for students. And this idea of self-disclosing, that's like a very big thing that we learned in social work, in our social work programs, is when is the appropriate time to self-disclose and when can it be effective. And I think that meeting with a lot of my students, it can be very effective, especially when I see students having a hard time opening up. They're like, I don't know, who is this woman? Why am I in this office? This is just really awkward. And I'm like, well, we'll just start off with, how was your day? What's on your mind right now? And we'll just kind of go from there. And if they're struggling to talk specifically about this experience that they had, maybe I'll share a little bit about myself. I know that's making myself very vulnerable for these kids, but I think especially for students where talking about feelings and emotions is not normalized, seeing me be vulnerable kind of like sets that example for them. But I do see, so I'm also not trying to bash my district. I'd like to stay there for a while.
In Valentine, Illinois.
B211.
Room.
I'm the only Asian staff member in our student services team. So there's 25 of us, I believe, and I'm the only Asian staff member. Majority are white. We do have a couple Hispanic staff members also, but sometimes I feel like it could be a double-edged sword too, where staff are constantly coming to me to ask specifically about how to navigate their classroom, how to bring in things like cultural sensitive topics in the classroom. Like if I'm talking about I don't know, let's say in like US history or something, like we have this like the pilgrimage chapter is coming up. How do I navigate that with my students? And me being a yes person, which is something I'm still working on, I put myself out there. I definitely go above and beyond to try to help my staff, but then at what cost is it to me? And I think that's where burnout comes in. But then I think my identity of being Asian American, being taught like, this specific work ethic, I don't reach out to people. So I kind of burn out on my own. Which can be very difficult, right? I think that what I'm slowly trying to learn and also role model for my students is that it's okay to ask for help. And I think that can be very difficult, especially when you hold an Asian American identity of like, I'm kind of alone on this island, it feels like, so therefore I have to go above and beyond and excel and not show weakness almost. And I'm learning that if I'm gonna be vulnerable to my students, I also need to show that I can show weakness in a way, or that I am here to improve.
Jeez.
That's a humanizing aspect, though.
Yeah.
Like, very few of my mathematics colleagues do that, but with intention in a space like this, but in a classroom dynamic, it does take a lot of vulnerability for if you're asking the young folks to do the same thing. It's just like, what's the way that I know that I can trust you? Like, I need you to do this with me.
I mean, and a question that I pose to my students, like for example, my students who are experiencing mental health issues like anxiety or depression, I'll ask them, do you feel comfortable talking to your teacher? And if they say no, then I'll ask, why is it easier for you to open up to me versus your teacher? And they're like, well, you're listening to me. Like, it's easier for me to trust you right now, even though I've only met you in one day, versus a teacher who I've spent several months with.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so there's this humanistic relationship that we have. And how do I share that with the rest of the staff?
Yeah. Man. Yeah. Again, there's just like a million things, like galaxies and supernovas are going off in my head and my heart right now. And I wish we had like 3 more hours. But I think I definitely want to double click on like how essential it is, right? That schools are a place for like that whole human development, right? And it's so inspiring and so encouraging that we have like a group of people, whether it be through content, whether it be through circle practices in the classroom, or like deep listening, open-mindedness, all these ways that we can affirm, right? To go back to that first question, right? Affirm that our whole humanity is just as critical. And I think we also, I'm encouraged by this gradual movement, this like shift towards recognizing that vulnerability is not weakness. I think we have been kind of like socialized to think that, and even the words, it sounds like weakness. Oh, I'm vulnerable, you know. But I think vulnerability actually is true strength, right? To be fully honest and to invite, to trust that other people want to see and love and acknowledge your full self. I hope let's build a world where we don't want to settle for like half-assed versions of each other, right? And that's why, man, I think that's when people say like, oh, I hate small talk. I think that's what they mean, right? Is that like we all know what the weather is, right? Like we're sitting outside. Like I know it's partially cloudy, okay? I want to know like who you are. Like I want to know what you care about. I want to, you know, and I think that you all as educators are providing that experience, and continue. And as I was saying, was it our conversation? I'm forgetting it. But before the panel started, I think just like unfortunately, I do want to have some time for Q&A, but there is one last question. Then hopefully, if we can, I know you have to head out 2:30.
Full disclosure, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So maybe we could do a final quick question, and then if someone has a specific question for you, we can ask that question first. But a quick like tangent call. I think we're all educators. It's just our content is different and our classroom is different. So a quick, planting of seed of like ideas in each of you, right? Like what type of experience of nourishment and growth can you kind of plant in other people around you, right? As the educator in your community. So final quick question for the panel. I'm gonna kind of try to combine, because we had 2 more. I'm gonna combine talking about the T-check, because I feel like we gotta talk about the T-check. Combine the T-check with like confronting the zero-sum game, like us versus them kind of thing. Segueing from our most recent question about how can we, even though we're Asian, of course we want to support our young Asian students, how are we also kind of working in solidarity to affirm, right, our other students of color. I think there's like a battle, right, where it feels like to affirm one community means to deny other communities, right? How, like, have you faced that? Have you kind of come across that confrontation? How have you navigated, right, that challenge to help nurture it, to move beyond that into sharing this thinking that like, actually, no, like we can all win together, right? And like there are kind of times and spaces where we're centering different things, but like, you know, why I feel like I need to stop trying to give my own thoughts there. But yeah, how have you navigated that if you have confronted that, whether from students or other adults? And again, perfect segue into the Teach Act. What has been like what's been your experience hearing from other adults, right? About like their response. Bless you. Have you heard things from like other adults, specifically non-Asian educators? I'm curious what you have heard, right? Now that the Teach Act is passed and implementation is kind of rolling out, what have you heard? What are you excited about? What are you concerned in regards to, again, like, is the zero-sum game coming up in those conversations? Yeah. Yes, thank you. And I think you all might be able to do that better than I can, but what I understand is the Teach Act is the very first of its kind in the United States. Illinois is the first, and you kind of touched on it a little bit briefly too, that mandates in high school, right? Not
K to 12.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see y'all. So yeah, K to 12 mandates learning of Asian American history.
At least the 1 unit per year.
1 unit per year. Yeah.
It was signed at my school district. So shout out to 219. Shout out to the big brother Albert Chan. He hates press. So
call him. His number is.
Albert was one of the handful of people who really was a driving force for this and continues to be a driving force for this. We've offered Asian American Studies as a history elective for the past couple of years, and you are our biggest inspiration for Asian American Lit, and we've got Asian American Lit too. And a lot of kids take them both at the same time, so a lot of times this year for our students, they're taking it as like a double, and so they go back to back with Asian American educators.
It's fabulous.
Because who else better to teach it, right? So in our own microcosm, because I feel like we serve a very unique community. It's beloved and thriving and has elevated voices in other communities as well. Our district 219 has also proposed and received ISB authorization to teach Assyrian as a language course, Assyrian and culture. So our students, I think we're like one of the 3 biggest Assyrian communities in the country. We have Assyrian teachers teaching about Assyrian language and culture, and our school board just approved for like a level 2 of that course. So like when we talk about like us winning, it's not just us winning, it's more of us winning. And so at least in the district I'm working in, there are becoming more opportunities because other community members are saying they're doing this, we can mobilize and organize, let's do this too. And I'm grateful that we have people who are in support of this, and both from like a financial backing, but also just like actually believing that this is worthwhile for our young people. Yeah,
I think this is great. I think we're all like, some of us are there, some of us are learning it, but like that audacity of equality, right? So we're getting there. I think the Teach Act is just amazing, but I also believe that some teachers are doing it well. Like they're like, here are the free resources, and Albert John's a huge part of that. Like the resources out there. There's so much out there for teachers who just want like free unit plans. And so it's just amazing what's out there. There's a plethora of resources for that. However, you mentioned like, what about non-Asian American teachers? Some would really love to teach it and are just afraid. You know, you want to know more than your students when you're conducting a lesson plan, right? And they're terrified because they didn't study it in college, right? At some point we were invisible or silenced or forgotten, right? They want to, but they're terrified and they're overworked and they're looking for like little things here and there, and their heart is in the right place. And others see it as overwhelming. Like, well, I can't do it this year. I just have X, Y, Z to do. How am I going to do this on top? And I'm going to be on Wikipedia all day long, right? Like, so I've seen a spectrum. And there is a lot of hand holding, and there's a lot of like, I'm the only one, right, who can do all of this for the entire staff. And so we have taken a step in the right direction by having this mandate. It is amazing. It got pushed through. Hats off to everyone who advocated for it. And now comes the hard work. And that is what is daunting for some teachers. And then of course we have some teachers that they don't believe in this, they're not passionate about it, they're not motivated for it, right? So like, what's happening in rural Illinois, I don't even know, right? Because I don't, right? So there's a lot of work to be done. It is a step in the right direction. I want to think the glass is half full, and I want to believe that teachers, they're trying to do the best that they can. So I feel like it's going to take some time, as everything does, right? Like getting to know someone who's so different from you, it's about the time you put in. So I try to stay positive and I help when I can. And I try not to be negative, like, oh, so-and-so's not gonna do it this year, right? Like, so, like we're trying to implement interior Chinatown in sophomore level English. And there are some teachers who are doing it, some that need hand-holding, and some that are like, this is so too much for me. Like, I don't know how to begin this unit. And there's also the fear, right? Like, I don't know how to teach this because I've never learned it, right? So we have just a spectrum. But I think if we chug away, we push along, and we get more buy-in, and we stay positive, like I think these teachers will get there. They need to get their feet wet. They do. And it's not going to happen overnight. Like we can't throw them a unit plan and say, you're doing it. I think we need to get their feet wet. Like, hey, let's try a short story this week, right? So don't feel overwhelmed. So I think we gotta, it's a unit and that's mandated, but there needs to be some compromise in that, that not everyone is at the same level. Some are first year teachers, some are veteran teachers, some are positive, some are in different, different modes of their own career and their journey, right? So I think we have to go into it with a positive attitude. And I do think Albert, Chan, everyone working on it gave so much. And so it's there. It's all about tapping into what can you handle this week, this month, this year? And each year, can we build upon that? Versus what I know the mandate is, which is a unit plan. And I think we need to work with people until they can get to that point. Some people are there, they've implemented it, it's beautiful, it's happening. But just like with everything, each year it will get better and stronger.
Yeah, I think to echo what Julie said, I think a lot of the teachers at my school are kind of feeling that, where it's teachers are on the spectrum and you're feeling afraid and worried. And also speaking from a student perspective, some of my students have heard about the Teach Act and kind of what does that mean for their classrooms. And I've had a student in my office before when we were doing a check and just say, I think the Teach Act is great, but I'm also a little bit worried that my teacher's going to expect me to be the expert. So, or it's if we're talking about Asian Americans or just Asian history in general, is everyone going to turn around and look at me? So that was something that I didn't even think about when navigating, even though that was something that happened to me when I was in school too. So I was like, wow, here I am, so excited. And you just provided me with a new perspective that just triggered some memories for myself from when I was in high school. So just navigating that and also
again, that vulnerability and explaining to my student, like, this is gonna be something new that we're all going through. And it's like, yes, is there gonna be, you know, those awkward moments where a student's gonna look at you, or maybe even the teacher just happens to look at you a little bit longer than other days. But it's like, how are we gonna navigate that and move forward? So there are a lot of murmurs. Not trying to hate on my school, District 211 and 11. I do hear things through the grapevines, and I definitely have noticed that a couple teachers have been coming into my office just trying to express their concerns. And again, that double-edged sword of, I am here to support students and also staff, but then it's like, where is my role in all of this? But then also, how do I put like boundaries up, right? That's something that I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah, the policy is one thing. Yeah, and again, it's momentous, and it's crazy that Illinois was also the first. You know, if I were a betting man, which I'm not, but if I were, and Kevin Hart is really trying to get me to start sports betting, but no, Kevin, no. But yeah, if I were a betting man, I'd be like, I would think LA, you know. So it's crazy, and that's a testament, you know, to people power, right? But now, as a restorative justice practitioner, as someone whose role, I'm a terrible community organizer. I did try to be an educational equity organizer at one point in my life when I was in the classroom. And I was like, that is not my lane, it's not my strengths. I love what other people do. So like when I kind of saw Teach Act from afar, and I was like, you guys go, man. I was like, I would have messed it all up, you know? But you know, personally, my relationship with it is, I hope that as, you know, a circle keeper, restorative justice practitioner, I think now is like, okay, policy is a step, but I am of the belief, I don't know if you all feel similarly, I'm of the belief that policy alone does not transform hearts and minds. And I think that the role now is not only a skill thing, it is a heart and mind thing, right? And I think it's, again, coming from a personal perspective, I think it's really important to still stand firm to like what we believe is true for our communities and what we need, and also not being judgmental. So I really love how you said like kind of affirming the spectrum of where people are, right? And understanding like why people might be scared or why people might be resistant. There's a reason, and being compassionate to people who may be resistant, like to the Teach Act, right? I think it's really important to the step of trying to get us all together and like heal together and affirm each other. It is a little bit past 2:30, so do you need, yeah.
I'll answer a question if there is one, and then I'll
Okay, cool,
step
yeah.
out.
Is there, so we are a little bit past our 2:30 time. We can do a little bit more questions, but does anyone have a specific question before Julie specifically?
Oh, for Julie specifically, no.
Okay.
But a question that.
Okay, great.
I feel like CPS.
Could you also share your name as well?
Sunny. And I feel like CPS is, tell me if you agree with this, they're trying to intentionally have a combination of schools that are racially diverse and ones that are kind of honoring the in cycle, like the in communities. Like, you know, Chicago's definitely like, we still have segregation because we're Chicago, but like, I feel like some of the CPS high schools are intentionally trying to be less diverse because that population in the neighborhood is, you know, I've served in 95% African American schools and also in Oregon and Connecticut, and then also Latino schools, like my current school right now. So I just feel like, do you feel like that's something that the networks are trying to be aware of, that there are pros and cons to a more Black high school versus a diverse high school, a more intentionally neighborhood, racially majority high school versus, and then you're at Jones, but like, what do you mind if I ask you that? Because I just felt like that's something that I've been wondering about CPS for a while. And you know, I have a couple friends at Central, but like, I'm wondering if that's your perspective as well, because I do feel like certain schools that they're trying to really highlight and strengthen are staying racial minority, majority of a certain group, and I think that that's actually a beautiful thing. I don't necessarily think that every single school has to be diverse, but that's just my opinion. And then obviously there are other ones like Jones that are very racially diverse. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, and maybe that's maybe against what your mission is, but I'm not sure where I
That's a good question.
Yeah. Is it okay that I ask
and I
you?
definitely am not.
Speak up your
I don't work at the board.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't love it. I mean, I'd love to meet. I'd love students to sit with other students who are different from themselves. It can't always be helped. But I mean, if it was me, that would be my goal. I don't know. I feel like the board, every year there's a new program. Every year it's like, we're doing zip codes. No, we're taking that away. Now we're doing this. So I try to find line when talking about the board, because if they're doing something this year, have hope that next year is completely a 180. I wouldn't concern myself with the here and now, because my experience in the 23 years that I've been here is that we never give 4 to 6 years for a program to work. It takes 4 to 6 years to see change. And if they don't see change the first year, they scrap it and do something new. And realistically, you can't see that kind of change in 1 year. You have to give a program an opportunity to get to the goal that you set. So I do understand your fear and frustrations, or however you feel about that. But it's forever changing, and student body is forever changing.
It's
what I
not
taught
focused.
10 years
either
ago.
they're trying to make them diverse or they're trying to make them neighborhood focused.
Yes.
And like they're actually different things. So if
Yeah.
they're trying to do both of them, fine. But then let's be clear that that's what they're doing, as opposed to like, we're trying to make diverse schools that pull from different neighborhoods and different income brackets. Like we're trying to make diversity SES all the way.
Yes.
Or we're trying to honor like a women's college, like the safe spaces of certain communities when they're a little bit more monochromatic. But what I see is that the district can't decide, and that then they're trying to pull from the 650 schools or whatever we have,
Sure.
and they're trying to make them different. But for me, that feels very unfocused and like not very visionary, but kind of pretty political and pretty like divided. So that's why I was thinking
Welcome to
that-
CPS.
Right.
Yeah, welcome to CPS. So yeah, I'd say there's a lot of red tape and issues there. I don't know, I wonder if we just, it's a big district, and if we could separate, maybe, I mean, pool school funding distributed evenly, but then this huge animal needs to like divide so that we are not having.
Or federally, they're not supposed to pull it equally. They're supposed to actually give Title I poverty schools, Title III bilingual schools. They're supposed to give some of those schools extra money actually to like center them
Right.
marginalized. So don't pull it equally.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
or
like
or
you
pull it
understand what
equally
I'm
because they're not
trying to
right?
get at, right?
Yeah,
like
so
you understand like
of course.
macrocosm, like what it should be, like
Yeah.
ideally.
I just don't think that they're really. I think that it's a money thing, and I don't think that they've
Yeah,
decided how to
100%.
do it, how to like honor like the rich families who are like, I'm scared to put my kids into CPS, and then to honor like really the poor families who probably need our support more than the rich families. So not necessarily in SES. I think the rich families need more support in SES than the poor families. but yeah.
No, I feel your concern. Yeah, I don't have like the ultimate
You're not
answer
answering
for like this
fully with
huge
insight and,
problem.
like,
I did want to mention one last thing before
Yeah.
I left about LA, because you mentioned you thought they might have been the first to do the Teach Act. So California has their own mandate for ethnic studies. So they are not just doing Asian American history. They are going to do all minority history in one class. That's not an elective, I'm sorry, that is mandatory for a semester.
Gotcha.
So they're going broader. They're gonna build solidarity with all groups through a course called Ethnic Studies versus one unit of the Asian American
Gotcha,
history.
gotcha.
Yeah. So which is just kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of a good one.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. No worries.
Well, thank you so much,
I
Julie.
know. Continue.
Let's
I wish
clap it
I
up
could
for
stay
Julie.
longer. Oh. Yeah, I'll see all of you. And thank you for inviting me here. This was crazy awesome. I wish I had like 5 more hours, like you said,
Yeah.
3 more hours. I don't think we could even get done in 3.
Oh, definitely not. We're just scratching the
All right.
surface. But we'll connect, yeah.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Meeting all of you.
So I also know that there are very anxious, patient sneakerheads who are ready to cop. So I know we have at least one more question. So yeah, maybe two questions. So and if we have.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Cecily. I'm actually founding an ethnic studies organization here in Chicago. So if you're interested, connect with me after. That ethnic studies fight has been like a 50-year fight. So I think it's important to recognize that's how long it took to get an ethnic studies mandate to happen. And it's still contested and still being fought for. But that's, I so appreciated what you all were saying about how like this journey of constantly becoming who you are as an educator and that being a lifelong process. And for me, like figuring out who I could be as a justice-centered Filipina educator came through ethnic studies. So I want to build on the question that I feel like you started to ask and push it a little further. So if folks don't know, there were Asian American plaintiffs who were part of the defeat of affirmative action.
Oh yeah.
Even though it was being driven by and led by conservative white interests that had been trying to strike down affirmative action for decades. And then the passage of the Teach Act in Florida happened at the same time that they were banning African American studies and making that, you know, basically illegal and criminalized. And so I would love, and I would definitely want to be part of this conversation with folks. Like, how do you see us both in our practice, like as Asian American educators, but then also in the work that we're doing with young people, AAPI young people, to not get caught up and buy into anti-Blackness. And I think that's a real thing that we have to reckon with within our peoples and our communities if we are going to really be moving towards solidarity and fighting for justice, because we are small. So you talked about like how small a percentage of folks that we are, and so we're not going to get free by being 2.5% of the teaching population in the U.S. So I'd love to just hear like how is that showing up for you in your practice and for you with the young people that you are supporting, you know, and educating.
I think for me, it's funny, if you met me when I was a child, I was just like, ugh, like I'm not gonna talk about political things, social justice, very quiet, very meek, but I shut it down right then and there. Like if there's ever, even in the hallways, I'm always trying to make myself seen to my students, so I don't stay in my office all the time. Usually during passing periods, I'll walk around and say hi to some students. If I hear something in passing, I try to shut it down right then and there. And I'm like, and what I tell the student is, if you disagree with me in this very moment, come back to my office, let's have a conversation about it. It's also kind of ironic in a way. So last week, one of our associate principal, he is identifies as a Black man. He asked me to be the sponsor of our Black Achievers Youth Club at school. And I asked why when we have other Black educators. And he's like, well, 1, there's time, but 2, he's like, I think it would be nice for our students to see you involved. He's like, because of the mission that you have essentially, like it would be great for them to see you come in as an ally, as an advocate, as an educator, coming in and saying you are important. I unfortunately have to decline because again, I'm a yes person, but I also have a lot on my plate. But I still definitely try my best to support a lot of different things that we do in our school. So another coworker likes to make fun of me saying that I have a t-shirt for everything. I really do.
And you can get
like,
some more. No,
like, right? So like, we are currently in Hispanic Heritage Month. So of course I had a Hispanic Heritage Month shirt to wear on the first day. So I definitely do try my best to help students see that even though I do identify as Asian American, I'm so proud of my identity, my ethnic identity, I am just as proud as of other ethnic identities. I try to celebrate that and show that. So, and I also try to
create a safe space for students to ask questions that they may be embarrassed or worried to ask in other spaces. So if I have a student in my office who's like, I'm thinking about this, I don't know how to navigate it, I'm like, just ask me the question, just be very candid with me and ask it, because I'd rather have you ask it to me than accidentally say it to someone else and then offend that person or get them really upset or hurt. So that's something that I definitely try to do, and in my Asian American club, I'm trying to connect my students with other clubs to show that solidarity.
I think for me is something, I don't know if you named it, but like the myth of the model minority, and just how it's used since the 1950s as a wedge between Black and brown and white communities. Part of my role outside of teaching classes in our school district is to debunk this myth, whether it's with staff members who have questions or who have the disconscious audacity to say things that they think are true, or to talk to our Asian identifying students and our Black identifying students, and like talking about the history between racial conflict in this country specifically. I don't have the historical context or experiences outside of the United States, being an Asian person living outside the United States, so I can only talk about like the Asian American experience or my Asian American experience, but that historical piece of where this tension has come from, what are they feeling, validating those feelings, but also like, it's just white supremacy culture. That's all it is. And just naming that as it is. I really appreciate, I talked to my wife about this out there, I really appreciate Gen Z, because it's like, take no shit, and this, it's fearlessness, something that I wish I had as a millennial growing up and going to high school. It's just like, they'll tell me what they're thinking. They're like, why isn't it fixed already? Like talking to me, like the older generation's like, why haven't you fixed this yet? I'm like, because I was waiting for you to help me. I needed help.
Exactly.
But like, being able to have those conversations, to have the vulnerability to talk and work with the young people like that, it's just naming those things within the classroom or outside of the classroom in non-academic spaces, but partnering and working towards dismantling systems and policies and structures that are dramatically impacting our youths. But outside of the education spheres, like having those real conversations with some of the Asian people that are in my life who were in support of students for fair admissions. Like, there's misconceptions about like who are the plaintiffs, where are they coming from, what are they asking. Yeah, I feel like in my experience asking people about their opinions about affirmative action, there's just so many misconceptions about affirmative action, and like just debunking and like sharing what I have learned in my own journey and process and how it impacts the different groups of people that it impacts. So like,
and I think like teaching about how any rights and freedoms that we have as Asian American peoples were fought for by Black people.
Exactly.
We owe a debt of gratitude to Black people and everything they've done to fight for freedom.
It's not a debt.
But it is, like
No,
it
it's not.
is. Like, and we worked in solidarity with each other. And again, that's something they don't want us to learn. They don't want us to understand that we have been part of freedom struggles. They don't want us to understand that we're more powerful when we're in solidarity with each other. And that's what the Teach Act and what ethnic studies is about, like uplifting and protecting the right to learn about those histories. Thank you both.
I just have a comment because I know Brian from CPS. I'm a CPS teacher. I work in the Austin area. You guys educated me on this topic, and I'm grateful to be here. The fact that it did not affect my community is why I didn't know anything about it. So I'm glad that you guys are educating the community about this. I just happened to stop by today and I stayed. So I'm grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful for Brian to be bringing this to the community because it's a topic that needs to be talked about. It does not affect my kids specifically, but this year we got an influx of Hispanic students that came into my school that do not speak English. And so this is the topics that need to be talked about. So we started curriculum circles at our school where we talk about different things that affect Black and brown children. These are things that we need to continue to talk about in every single school.
Yes.
I love this right now, and I just wanted to say that because even your topic about CPS and how it looks different in different schools, it does, and it's so crazy because I'm not from Chicago, and I hate that, and that's why I became a teacher in Chicago.
I'm not judging, but that's effed up.
It's so crazy because I did not, and that's the very reason because I came to school in Chicago for marketing and PR, and I seen the need because people were pulling their kids out of CPS, and then I'm like, oh, I need to become a teacher in Chicago public schools, and that's what I did. And the fact that you said that, I don't know if you live in Chicago, but that it's crazy, and they do not distribute money the same in these schools. Jones looks different than the school I work at, and he knows it. I hold 4 positions in my school. I teach bilingual students. I'm the case manager, and I have 2 diverse learner caseloads right now in my school.
I do MTSS and math and STLS and like everything. And
It's crazy.
Like, they're also like, I think that issues are that like they're pulling you not only because they want you to support and be an ally, but because they want you to do more work. So I think that's part of like the justification part, like the labor.
And they're only going to do it to minorities.
Yes.
They're only going to do it to minorities. They're not going to ask the next person.
Yes, right? Yeah.
And it's hard to walk away because our kids need it. Who's going to protect our kids? But I'm so grateful to be here. This was great.
Man, I think I think I speak for everybody that we're glad you're here.
Oh my God, I can take this back to work.
So I do want to close up with a couple closing comments, and then we can get back to beefing up our closets. So two kind of I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in providences. I believe in purpose for everything. So I love that you're here. It just shows alignment in the universe. That you felt some sort of tugging, like I should go to Vital Chinatown today. Well, this is the calling you felt. Okay. Another thing, I think similar to great policy being only the beginning, I see great panels also as just a beginning. And again, for those who may not know, I am the founder of We Each Belong, which is a racial healing, restorative justice streetwear brand. And we use the practice of circles as through the funding we get from our merch, which is right here. We can talk more about it. Through the funding of our merch, we bring circle to create more healing spaces and deeper conversation, deeper understanding, deeper listening for Asian, Black, Latino, and beyond. So the reason I bring that up is not only to, if you want to learn more and help support through the merch and stuff like that, you can come talk to me afterwards. But a specific call to action. Panel is only a great beginning because, as we kind of heard, I'm sure there's a lot stirring, like thoughts, other questions, other ideas, wonderings, things you want to kind of build on, right? And I hate when panels end because I want those things to be able to go somewhere and manifest, right? So if you're holding on to an idea, a question, whatever, here's what we can do. So I love Circle because Circle is not a conversation of learning, of love, of understanding and connection, affirmation, not denying. And yeah, appreciate y'all. This is community right here. And so we're about to, let's continue spreading and growing this radical love with each other. So appreciate y'all. Thank you.